I was telling Zoya, who owns, she's the creative producer, and it's her idea
Yeah.
actually. It's always her idea to make this. She came up with the name too. Angry Young Men is her name. I mean, I was telling her that it's been so graceful, and she was like, "What do you mean? I never meant to interfere." So, but initially I was very apprehensive. Also because they're all personalities in their own selves, like Salman, Zoya, Farhan. They're all personalities. So I was worried that, okay, they'll say do this, do that. In fact, they gave me a lot of feedback, but it was always very constructive and craft related. It was never about, don't say this about our dad.
Thank you so much for joining and talking about your directed miniseries, Angry Young Men.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, happy to chat.
How are you feeling in terms of how it's being received?
It's been interesting. I mean, it's been overwhelming. And I didn't expect it to touch so many people. So I'm very happy about that. And I mean, the criticisms are also very interesting. So,
What would those be? I would love to hear that because I haven't read anything. If you want to share.
yeah, I mean, there are things that people are saying, and then there are things that I have distilled out of it. So I can tell you that. I cannot quote
Sure.
unquote what others are saying. But I think maybe I would have used a little less music overall, like in terms of craft. Maybe I mean, there are some places where I feel it could have had a little more stay, it could have been slower, so things like that. Mostly craft related things. And I felt it, the first time I saw it with a full house in a theater. And immediately I felt, oh my God, this should have been different. This should have been like this. So, but I guess that's okay.
But that's a curse of every artist, right? Every artist goes through that. Like it's never good enough. So I don't think that's necessarily criticism. That's just more so, trying to be a perfectionist, which we all cannot be at the end of the day.
Not perfectionist also. I think that's the only way to grow too. Even when I was an
Yeah.
editor, I mean, I always used to listen to all the criticism and absorb what made sense to me. Like not take it too personally, thankfully. I think editing has taught me that because everybody has an opinion and it's fine. So, but it's a great teacher. I mean, you learn a lot. You learn a lot listening to people who have divergent views. So it's good.
That's great. It's interesting that your journey started as an editor, correct?
Hmm.
And now you are sort of getting into the realm of director. This was a directorial debut, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
How was that transition? Because an editor is more or less, not trying to generalize, is an introvert individual, right? You're
I
just
think
sort
I
of,
am. I am too.
but being in that secluded, isolated room, for the lack of a better word, and editing, and then you're sort of thrown not only into this world of chatting with people, but chatting with people the likes of, Javed Akhtar and Salim Khan. What was that transition like, and how long it took you to sort of adapt to that? Or
I think it took me a month or two, maybe more, because I mean, I've spent so much time in solitude or, just with the director and the producer. And suddenly here I was on a set where everybody was looking at me for everything, right? So for me, that was the more challenging part than talking to these people. It
Mm.
was more about how do I manage the people who are my crew, people who are looking at me for every instruction or, things roll here because I say they roll here. So that took me a little while. I think just the sheer amount of talking is more and it's so externalized. So that also, but in a couple of months, I think we had some, initial, I had difficulty communicating and all that. But I think with time, it kind of sorted itself. Like I think because I was so internalized, I wouldn't say everything, say to my cinematographer, and then I would be like, oh, ye to mujhe hi bolna tha. I should have said it. So, but yeah, in a couple of months, it happened. Actually, I always wanted to be a director because I always wanted the stories to be mine, or at least the gaze to be mine, the vision to be mine. But I went down the editing route. And of course, it was great. I think it was providence because you learn so much about the construction of films, and you're so close to the actual film making. So it was good. I think it was very good training. And now was the right time.
That's so good to hear because I've always wanted to be a director, and somehow I fell into the world of editing, and then I got into
Editor
directing
yourself?
it. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I always wanted to do narrative features, direct narrative features. Somehow I fell into the world of not only directing documentaries, but also editing documentaries. But before that, I was editing a lot, but just getting into that transition of directing, it's a completely different ball game. And I'd never, when you're on the set, like I was talking about earlier, the solitude, in your own world versus on a set. I did not think that it was going to be easy, but it sort of became easy over time before I even realized it. Now, you know how you were saying 2 months? I can't recall that. Maybe it was like a year, but I just don't remember that time. But I understand that constructing the story, it helps a lot when you know in your head how it's going to weave together, right?
Yeah, I think so. And like in a documentary, of course, in a narrative feature, you know where it's going. But in a documentary, especially like this one, I didn't know where it's going. I had a very vague idea. I had a very vague chronology of this is what happened in their lives. And these were the people who were part of it. But I did not know exactly what it is going to be. I just knew that I want to keep a human lens on them. That was something I was very clear about right from the beginning. Other than that, the story evolved. Like
Hmm.
that, if we are going to go into their pasts up to this point, or come back and then come to the present, and then what they did, what they feel about this, that. I mean, so the story evolved, but the lens was what I knew. I mean, will be this. And it was
Yeah.
very interesting because it kind of found itself, very providentially too, because every time I would think, okay, I want something that will fill up the story here, I eventually got it. So it was really like the universe supported me in the making of this because we were shooting in the middle of the pandemic. It was so tough
Mm.
because our protagonists were old. It was inconvenient. We were all in masks. There were so many restrictions. You know, at that point, I felt, how is this even going to work? Yeah, but it
Yeah.
did. It
I
did.
I say this to almost everybody I chat. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people I chat on this podcast. And I was speaking to Geeta as well, your
Hmm.
editor.
Yeah.
And, the thing with documentaries is, at least for me,
Hmm.
the stories that I sort of tell, for now at least, that may change, is, you're following a protagonist in a documentary, and you know what the beginning is. You know what you would like the end to be potentially, but you don't know anything else in the middle. And that feeling excites the hell out of me and scares the crap out of me at the same time, right? And I think that's what challenges you as an individual, just figuring it out all the time because it's also in production, also until the end of post-production, it always changes.
Yeah. I
Let
mean,
me tell you, sorry, go on, please.
I mean, it was a little different for me because maybe because I had this chronology in my head. So I knew that, okay, this is what I'm going to follow roughly, but I didn't know how I'm going to end it. Also, because I knew that once they split and they were doing their own thing, do I want to go into that, not go into that? Or, you know, how do I want to go about it? I always had this vague idea that I want to end it poetically. And when in one of the later shoots with Javed Saab, he read this. I mean, I had read this book of his, Tarkash, and he had
Mm.
this prose in the beginning, which was written by Krishan Chandra. And I just asked him to read it. And the moment he read it, I knew this is the end. I knew this is how it's going to end. So it was a moment that happened on the shoot. Like I really got goosebumps when he read it. And
I
I'm so
bet.
happy to know that so many people have connected to it the same way that I did. It's really beautiful.
Well, it's always about going with your gut, right? And when you go with your gut, you're tapping into other people's psyche as well, your audiences, most of the time.
Absolutely. Yes, not really from the mind, you're reacting
Yeah,
from your body.
yeah,
And I knew somewhere also that it is a lot about aging. It's a lot about living a life, a big life, doing things, having legacies, spawning children who go on to become successful. And it's not just about films. It's not just about that. It is about looking back, reflecting on, okay, what is this life that we lived? So that kind of, I mean, it's there for me in it. Because suddenly, you're very successful, but you're still going to age
yeah.
and you're still going to have really, you know, problems with that. So that was very interesting to me because I met them when they were old, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the first thing that struck me that, okay, these two cool dudes, but they're really old now. So, but it was great, I think, because they were also in a space where they wanted to reflect and, think back and not just regurgitate the same things that have been talked about over and over. Why did you split?
And I'll tell you, so first of all, I mean, we're chatting now. I haven't really said anything about how I felt about this series, and I want to thank you because the very first film that I remember watching with where I paid attention to the credits, you know, the I remember watching Mr. India when I was probably, I don't know, 11, 12, and the word written by Salim-Javed came up. And then it said lyrics Javed Akhtar. So I thought Salim Javed was one person and Javed Akhtar was another person. Um, and just watching all that, like, Sholay, Devar, and all the other films, Trishul, it was the way you did it and your team did it. It really paid not only tribute to their films, but who they are as individuals. You said, for you, the way it closed was your favorite part, which for me was well, plus the cell phone footage where they get together. But the scene that really hit me so much, and I'm sure it hit a lot of people, is when he talks about, is this coffee and breakfast and bread coming for me. It's coming for somebody else, maybe. That really, really hit home. It was beautifully done. And that it's a credit to you and your team because to evoke those emotions, even with people who are very well established, is it's not easy because people don't feel comfortable talking about those kind of things.
Yeah. 1 second. I'm just going to put off my WhatsApp
No
disturbing.
problem. No problem.
I mean, I think it's also a function of meeting them over and over, spending a lot of time, being able to gain their trust.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm also like, it's also my personality. I like to talk about these things. I like to talk about origin stories, where you come from, even as a person. I mean, I'd like to know that about people, why they are the way they are. who they think they are. So these are things that interest me.
As an editor, now a director, how difficult was it at all, if at any much so, is that not to involve, I mean, you were involved in the post-production because you're the director, but at the same time, finding that balance where you're not stepping on, trying to sort of be the editor while you have an editor, or was that an easy transition for you?
It was easier than I thought it would be. I was very involved in the edit. I was there every day,
Hmm.
but I was actually very happy that Geeta was there, and I haven't heard your conversation with her. I mean, so I don't know what all she has told you, but it was very interesting for me to not actually be sitting on the table. It was really good because I had a bird's eye view every single day, and I could just focus on the broader strokes, on the story, and okay, where do we go from here? Those sort of things. So it was really good. I mean, and I think we had very good chemistry. I mean, even Geeta had reservations. I don't know if she told you about it, but she had
She
reservations.
didn't.
She had several reservations that, you're an editor. Are you even going to let me work? And, are you going to click the mouse and all that? I was like, it was actually a great discovery for me. And also big relief that I don't have to do it. It was very liberating because as a director, you are part of the editing process,
Yeah.
right? And if you also have to do the construction and the carpentry of it, I think it's very difficult. Then you lose anyway. You're very low on objectivity because you've done the research, you've gone and shot, you've spoken to these people. Now you know the footage in a certain way. I think it's best to detach that point, which was great to do with Geeta because she was equally invested. She was very diligent. She knew the material very well. So it was great. I didn't
That's
step on her toes. At least that's what I would like to.
it's interesting you mentioned that, right? Like, I think when you edit something too much, and this is not to take away from Geeta's job or anyone else's job because she had assistants and all that, but when you're editor, and I'm sure you went through this too, that you are finessing every little itsy bitsy thing, left, right, center. But when you get into that director's chair, yes, you're involved in the editing process, but you realize how amazing it is to sort of, like you said, bird eyes view, right? And all the tedious stuff. Again, it's not something that it's not important. That's the
Of
editing
course.
team's job, right? That's their job. And you realize, okay, my job is now this, and this is something I like more, maybe to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
absolutely. I think I like it way more. I mean,
Yeah.
editing is my first love because it's given me so much confidence in myself. It's really like brought me so close to the craft of filmmaking. And I love it because I do it all the time. Even when I'm having a conversation, I'm editing it.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
done
I
it
get
for
it.
so many years. And it's not in a disturbing way. Like it's not disturbing, or I'm not trying to edit out what the other person is saying, but it's also just like, okay, this is what is playing out. This is how the scene is playing out. So there is a detachment to it, which I really enjoy as an editor. So I think that spirit will always be there. But I think I like this. It's also a new challenge, right? It's something new to do, something new to discover. And I've edited for close to 16, 17 years now. So I think it's time to
Move
build
on.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, what was that moment, Namrata, if you can remember, that told you or that defined for you that I want to be an editor or I want to direct films? Whenever that was, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Tell me that
Actually,
story.
I trained to be a coder. That was, I mean, that's what I studied in college. VC++
Hmm.
and coding. And very soon I discovered I'm not good at it. And it's not something I enjoy. I don't even like going to college. But I didn't know what else to do. I just had this very vague notion that I think I'm an artist and only I knew it. Nobody else ever told me that or thought about it. And I come from a very academic family. So it was always expected that I will do this, work, in a
Mm,
good job and live the good life. So I quit it, much to the chagrin of my parents, and I started looking for what I want to do. So I did some odd jobs and I landed up in NDTV in
mm,
Delhi. That's
mm.
where I grew up in Delhi. And I really enjoyed my time there. And I thought, what if I study this? Like, what if I study how to make this? And I started applying to film schools, got into one, but I still didn't know what stream should I choose because there was direction, cinematography, editing, and sound. And I was like, okay, my parents hate this step that I'm taking. So maybe if I take editing, they'll think that it's very close to computers, which I have done for graduation. So, I can do a job or at least something connected to IT. I mean, it was really that naive. So I took it up, and I don't know. I think again, it was really the universe's blessing. It was providence. It was because it changed my life. I just loved being in that room. So I started editing on the Steam Deck, and it was like just me and the steam deck and this small lamp. I just loved it. I would spend so many hours there, just sitting, doing ting, 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 just thinking, what can I do like this? Can I do it like this? So I just spent a lot of man hours doing that. Even then, of course, it's only after I came to Bombay I realized the scope of editing. Like what in film school, it's still limited. You're working on materials that others have shot and which have already been passed on, like from one batch to the other. But here, suddenly it was an open playing field. So it was great fun. I just thought, oh my God, it fits like a glove. I love it. So that's how editing happened by chance. And then within a few years, I started realizing that, okay, when I had that choice in film school, I actually really wanted to check direction. But the way things were at that time in my life, because my parents were so against this move. I mean, who goes to film school and who leaves a good education and goes to study film, and what will happen to you? You're already like 23 years old and all that. So I think that, and also I didn't probably have an innate confidence then that I can be the top dog, that I can be a director. I think I didn't have that. So I had to go through this journey to reach this point where I felt that, okay, now I can actually do what I really wanted to do, which was to direct.
What gave you that confidence?
I think appreciation for my work and just an inner knowing, that, okay, I can tell stories well. And I have a good sense of characters. I have a good sense of story. I have a good sense of rhythm. So I knew that I can. And I mean, many a times while editing, I felt that, okay, I would have done it this way. I would have done it this
Yeah,
way, which actually can start frustrating you beyond a point. So that's
100%.
why I thought, I mean, it's also not fair if you're thinking like that a lot, then it's not fair to the job you're doing as an editor also. So that's why I thought it's better for me to say my own stories.
While working on Angry Young Men or after it finished, or both, what was one thing that you discovered about yourself?
I mean, there are quite a few things I would say that people find it easy to talk to me, I think, because I'm a good listener. I knew that about myself, but it kind of uh, got validated while I was doing this. And also the fact that I'm not very attached to what I have shot. Like as an editor, I obviously had no attachment because somebody else had shot it.
Yeah.
But even as a director, I think I'm not very attached. So that is something which was very good to know. That it's very easy for me to leave things out, kill my darlings, and say that, okay, no, not, I mean, we have to do this in the interest of story, movement, progression. So, yeah, so that was a good, interesting discovery, I would say.
Have your parents or family seen Angry Young Men?
Oh, yeah. And my parents thought that it's a lot of people are talking. They really enjoyed it. They really, even my brother, my sister-in-law, they loved it, and they gave me full report of what they thought was working, it's not working, and also they've been part of my journey, right? Like it's been 3.5 years for me. I started working on it December 2020, and it's come out now in August 2024. So it's been a long journey, and it's been very adventurous. I don't want to use a negative word, but so it adventurous because there were so many days I felt that, oh my God, how am I going to get this footage? How am I going to get this through? There was just too many things. There were so many ups and downs. It was a roller coaster. It was really a roller coaster. So they have been,
I sorry, go on.
no, that's what. So they've been a party to it. So I don't think they can watch it very objectively, removing that emotion that what all I have been through the making.
Yeah. And working with, various production companies, right? You have, I think it was SK Films, Excel, and Tiger Baby, I think it is. How was Were they just sort of there to facilitate, well, obviously the financing and everything else, but how much involved were they in the creative process, if at all, obviously it's their fathers, right? And detaching themselves from the story, what kind of liberty they gave you? Um,
They didn't interfere with the edit at all. They didn't get into it. Uh, and they gave me a lot of space.
that's
They,
good. Which
yeah,
shows, which shows in the film.
yeah, they gave me a lot of space. And I feel very grateful for that because when I started, I was very, very apprehensive that, uh, I'll be censored, but that didn't happen. But of course, I mean, when you're speaking to a lot of people, uh, you are, of course, limited by what they tell you and have to carve a story out of that. But otherwise, I think there was absolutely no censorship at all. In fact, I feel I was telling Zoya, who owns, she's the creative producer, and it's her idea.
Yeah.
Actually, it's always her idea to make this. She came up with the name too. Angry Young Men is her name. I mean, I was telling her that it's been so graceful. And she was like, what do you mean? I never meant to interfere. So, but initially I was very apprehensive. Also because, they're all personalities in their own selves, like Salman, Zoya, Farhan, they're all personalities. So I was worried that, okay, they'll say do this, do that. In fact, they gave me a lot of feedback, but it was always very constructive and craft related. It was never about, don't say this about our dad or don't say this. And
Yeah.
also, you see like their mom, Honey, who's in the series, and she speaks her mind. She's so candid.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I absolutely loved her speaking on camera at all times. It was awesome.
So I think they are also like that. Even Javed Saab and Salim Saab, like there are things that they don't like in it, but they were laughing about it. I guess that also comes with age and experience.
Age, yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
eh.
As you get older, like I think as you hit 40, you start to realize it doesn't really matter what the world says, but you're still not there. And it slowly progresses up until I think 60s. And then you're like, who the hell cares? Right? I mean, I've seen that with people around me too, even doing documentaries and talking to people, you just get that sense. that you don't, as you get older, you don't give two crap about, anybody's opinion. And that's the way it should be. We should all live like that, but unfortunately we don't.
I think we are like that as kids. Then in the middle, we learn and get conditioned, and then we
Yeah.
spend a lot of time unlearning it. And it takes maybe till that time when we're 60 already, by the
Yeah.
time we're unlearning.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I you were talking about Zoya. I spoke to Zoya last year for her film The Archies, which came on the Netflix. And I was telling her, so I watch a lot of Hollywood. I used to watch a lot of Indian cinema, and then after I think 2007, it just kind of went like I just kind of didn't watch much because I wasn't, as you get older, and I wasn't really connecting with those mainstream films. I do enjoy the independent cinema that comes out. But what I was telling Zoya was there's only a very handful of directors in India who I really enjoy. One being Vidhu Vinod Chopra.
Mm.
I'm a huge fan of his, but especially his film Parinda. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes,
Um,
many, many times.
yeah, I love that film. And then, Shekhar Kapoor is one of them, and Zoya. Farhan too, but Zoya's film, somehow they just get into that deep core and just
Absolutely.
pulls you out like that. And she's an amazing storyteller. All of her films, like from Gully Boy to Dil Dhadakne Do, like completely opposite, but not,
Yeah,
right? But
absolutely. Luck by
yeah,
chance. I find her very inspiring. I really
she's
find her very,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, she's
I was
amazing.
so happy that she was my first producer because she has that, chutzpah. She has that devil may care kind of attitude, which was a good learning for me. I could do with that a little bit more.
Yeah. What's next for you, Namrata? Anything in the works that you can chat about?
I'm working on narrative fiction right now. I have a couple of scripts that I'm pitching and hoping that it gets materialized. And I mean, do some fiction before going back to documentaries. I like both very much. I think they really feed each other. So
Yeah.
now it's time for fiction.
I think, I have this conversation with a lot of people, and I was talking about this to Geeta as well, is that it's easier to go from go from nonfiction to fiction as opposed to the other way around. It's a lot challenging from coming from fiction world into the documentary because there's no story. Like you just know the beginning and the end, and you're trying to find your way in there, right? As you're producing and directing it. So that should be
Because,
okay for you.
yeah, and even as an editor, I started with documentaries. I did 5 documentaries before I edited Oe Lucky Lucky, which was my
Mm.
first feature film. I think you stopped watching films around that time. It was 2008. Oe Lucky Lucky Oe, then LSD Love Sex or Doka, Ishkia. I did Kahani.
Ishqiya, I've seen. You edited Ishqiya and Kahani?
Yeah.
Okay, so those two films I know very
And
well.
Baja Barat I did.
Okay, that
So,
was good too. So you've
yeah.
done good stuff. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I that's awesome. I mean, no, I'm not saying that it came out wrong. That came out so wrong. I didn't mean that. I meant to say that I did not know that you did those. I'm sorry.
It's fine, totally fine.
Yeah, this is not getting edited, so don't
I
worry.
was traveling in a bus once, and there was this lady next to me, and she said that, "What do you do?" So I hate telling people
I know, I know.
that I'm a film editor. They're like, "What is that?" And then you have to explain. So I just didn't want to have that conversation. I told her I'm an editor. So she said, "Oh, you must be getting this question all the time that who's an editor and what does an editor do, a film editor? I'm not going to ask you that." So I said, "Oh, really?" I was suddenly very interested in her. And she said, "So, what do you work for? Stardust, Filmfare, Cineblitz?" Like she was naming magazines because she thought I'm a film editor means I
Yeah,
work
news
for a
editor,
film
yeah.
magazine. I was like, okay, here we go again. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's hard explaining people like when they ask you what do you do, I'm like, oh, it's the same feeling with me. Like I'm like, how do I try to explain this so they get it? right? And you don't want to sound too obnoxious and arrogant. I'm like this person, but at the same time, you don't want to undersell yourself either. So just trying to find the happy balance.
So what's your definition? How do you explain it?
It took me a while, but now I used to say filmmaker, but that's just a generic term. Now I just say I'm just a producer director. That's it. Just keep it simple. And if they ask you more, then you get into it. If they don't, then you don't move on from it.
Producer director, it's more descriptive than
Yeah.
filmmaker. Filmmaker sounds like
Yeah.
you're still like, I mean, people assume that, okay, you haven't really made a film, but you aspire to make one.
Yeah, yeah. And it does, you're right. I mean, I realized that after I think few months of saying that and people didn't pick up, they just kind of didn't even ask me any other questions. But when you say producer director, I mean, majority of the people know what that is in a nutshell. But yeah. But that's amazing. I'm so glad that, you were behind this film because honestly, now I'm not aside from your skills of storytelling, I know that how aside from that, the most challenging thing is getting people to be comfortable with you. Otherwise, they won't share anything with you, right? And that is a skill, an art that not everybody possesses. And kudos to you that everything that you see, I'm not taking away credit from anybody else. Everybody did their amazing job, but just that level of comfortness that you created on the set with the individuals, and not only they're just talking to you, there's a whole bunch of other people around, like so that you're sharing all these details. It's a really amazing skill, and kudos to you that you were able to pull that off. I mean, it's hats off.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a thank you so
I
sorry,
have
go
to
on.
add that I had a great crew, and everybody was, I mean, very small crew.
Yeah.
My editor, my assistant, and my executive producer. I mean, it was like while we were making it. And of course, the people who were present on the set and everyone, my DOP. But everybody was so invested, it just happens sometimes. I think it happened this time.
Yeah,
Everybody
the
was on,
everything falls into place at the right time.
I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, that's the and again, like that goes to the leadership on the set, the captain of the ship, right? So that's what I always say. It's top-down approach and everybody feels it. And if again, it won't show up on the camera if things were going off the hook. It will be very obvious. So thank you so much for making it. I was looking forward to it as soon as I saw the trailer, and I binge watched it in literally, 2.5, 3 hours, and it was amazing to kind of relive the childhood, but also finding out the story behind these two great individuals.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much
Awesome.
for watching.
No, no, thank you for making it. I would love to chat with you one more time or a few more times in the future about your other films. Maybe we can chat it whenever you have time. I think this was great, and then I can say that the films that you have done are amazing.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's gonna be the highlight of my conversation with you. That comment.
It's fine. Absolutely fine. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Namrata.
Okay. Thank you, John.